In this video, I'm showing you how I made this large outdoor sign for Halloween. I love the Legend of Sleepy Hollow movie, and so I am so tickled to have this as a yard decoration this year. And the main ingredient is a $25 thrifted headboard. I found mine at a local thrift store, but you could check Facebook Marketplace as well. The first step in transforming this piece of home furnishings into a creepy outdoor Halloween decoration is to wipe it down. Try to get any loose debris, dust, and all that good stuff off. Then you're ready to apply paint. I recommend this one. I've had really good luck with it and it's easy to apply. The only thing worth mentioning about painting up a headboard, I think, is just to be mindful of your brush strokes and have them all going the same direction. This is how mine looked after one coat. So I do a second coat on the solid pieces of wood, and then that center piece is actually not solid wood, so I had to do 3 coats on it. I even contemplated leaving the middle like it was because it kind of looks like the burnt wood technique, don't you think? But I painted it anyway. There's 2 reasons I love this paint. It's fast drying, so by the time I was done with my first coat, I was ready to start all over and do the second coat. I did have 2 fans in the barn blowing on it, so that helped too. And that's not a scarf, by the way. That is a wet dish towel that is keeping me cool because I'm doing Halloween decorations and it's still 90-degree weather outside. But anyway, the second reason that I like this paint is that when it is finished, it's so smooth. I don't know if it's self-leveling paint or not, but it's got a really smooth finish. Let me preface all the rest of this video by saying, if I would have known the hack that I later learned while making this video, I would have used it first. So this is a DIY stencil I've made with my Cricut, and this was the largest one I thought I could make. However, I learned a hack to make even longer ones, so more to come on that. But this is the Fusion mineral paint that I started out using to do my stenciling. When you're working with stencils, ones that you've made homemade or that you've bought from Etsy or whatever, be careful when you're removing the transfer sheet. You can see mine has got a lot of fuzzies on it, and that's because I fuzz mine quite a bit so that it doesn't tear my vinyl when I'm trying to take it off. Also, it's really important to press down all around the edges of your letters to make sure that there won't be any bleeding, or to minimize bleeding, because I won't say that mine doesn't have bleeding, because it does. The paint I'm using is Fusion paint in the color metallic gold, and the only reason I chose to use this paint is because it's what I had on hand, and I actually run out of it and have to use another kind that I have that works just as well and is cheaper actually. I'm using a sponge pouncer to apply this paint, and I believe the pouncing motion is going to give the best results because it kind of makes it look like hammered metal. So I'm kind of brushing it on and then finishing it off with the pouncing motion. And I did 2 coats with this paint. And as soon as I was finished with the second coat, I peeled off the vinyl stencil. And when you make a homemade stencil, you have to find a way to keep your middles intact, like the middle of the O and the E. And if you're interested in how I make my stencils, I will include that next. But if you already know how to make your own stencils and you don't need to know the hack to make the long stencils, then you can skip past the stencil part. And the last step to this stencil is to fill in the gaps. So I've just got a smaller little sponge brush and filling those in now. Prior to learning the hack, which allows me to make a longer stencil with my Cricut Maker, which I will share with you in this video, I thought I would stamp some of the words on. And this is not a terrible idea if you have a stamp that is the correct size for your lettering, which these were a little small, but I thought I could make them work. But then see, I had to go and fill in every letter, and that was tedious. And I didn't even really like the font very well. So then I started looking into other options, and that's how I learned to make longer stencils. So this is the hack to make a long stencil or decal, which would usually require smart vinyl because you can cut without a mat. But instead, we're going to use a workaround, and we're going to use cheap Dollar Tree vinyl. But first I did another stencil to make the word in. The hack for making a longer stencil or decal without the smart vinyl is pretty simple. It's just use some packing tape or Gorilla Tape and tape some mats together. And for the word headless on my headboard, I taped 3 mats together. And this is a Dollar Tree vinyl that I'm using. You have to make sure that your tape is a good job. It has to be very smooth. It can't catch on anything in the machine or this won't work. So any curled up edges on the vinyl, I've also taped that down too. When you click Make It, it's going to assume that you are working without a mat because it's length. So just click Next. Then select Smart Vinyl, removable or permanent. And if you actually have removable vinyl, that's great, but the permanent vinyl will work too. Next, when you load your mat, it's going to measure the length somehow, and it's going to run it through the machine a few times to make sure that you have enough material. If there's any hitches in the giddy up, it'll happen here. If it goes through smooth, then you're clear for takeoff. For my words Sleepy Hollow, they were longer than my 12-inch mat, so I taped 2 together to make a 24-inch mat. And here's how I made that stencil. So here's my Sleepy Hollow text, and I'm going to show you how I make it into a stencil. And the first thing I need to do is weld it. So I select the text, and then I go to Combine, and then I hit Weld. And you can see that it welds these letters together, which is important. The next thing I do is make a rectangle. And I like to change the color so that I can tell it apart. You need to unlock it so you can size it correctly. And you need to send it to the back behind the letters. These are not the exact dimensions that I used. I'm just showing you on my phone here, but make sure that it's no wider than 12 inches. You want to pretend that your yellow box or whatever color box you have there, that's your vinyl. And you're going to cut those words out of it. Next, you select both the text and the box and go to Combine, and then click Exclude. Now you got to make some little band-aids, I call them, to attach the middles of your letters. So that's just simply making a rectangle shape and sizing it down to make these little band-aid shapes. And then you bridge it between your the holes in your letters and the rest of the vinyl. So you can see how I've straddled this one over the E. I try to pick a narrow point to put them. I have all of them off to the side here working on this, and then you just place them where you need them. Once you've got your band-aids all on, then you go to Combine and select Unite. And now you've saved the middles of your letters and your stencil is ready to be cut. Now that we know how to make our stencils longer, we can paint over the headless, which I've already done. I'm going to redo it. And you see what I mean? If I would have known this hack from the start, all this would have been centered much better, much better. But I'm working with what I've got here. So while I'm waiting on that first coat of paint to dry to erase that mistake, I'm going to go ahead and distress the rest of this. So I've mixed up some warm brown paint to use for distressing, and I'm going to use a stiff stencil brush to just dry brush it all along the edges and wherever I think this sign needs to look old. And then I did my second coat of paint, completely covering up the first headless. So remember I said I ran out of the Fusion Gold paint, so then I opened up this bottle of paint, and it's from Walmart. It's cheaper. I'm not sure how much, but I'm sure it was cheaper than Fusion paint. But I still used a sponge brush and pounced this paint on the same as I did the other. I do find that this paint actually took less coats. Like, I felt like it covered more. And it's always so satisfying to reveal those stencils. And then the last part is filling in the gaps. Now, since I had some dead space over to the sides because I wasn't able to properly center my lettering like I wanted to, I decided to paint some creepy old trees. And this is totally optional. I just mixed up a sort of gray color paint in my paper plate palette, and I took my paintbrush and just kind of went with it. I thought about putting some of these IOD transfers on those, like their rose bushes, and then I would have kind of swiped some black paint over top to kind of uh, dirty them up, but ultimately I decided not to. Now for the pieces that make it stand up. I bought 4 of these eye bolts, and I got a 10-foot piece of rebar and cut it in half, making 2 5-foot pieces. My husband helped me and drilled the holes in the back of the legs where the eye bolts would go, and then tighten them in place, making sure that the loop of the eye hook is so that the rebar can go down through them. So the rebar goes at least a couple of feet down in the ground and holds it steady. So here's what it looks like in the daytime. I'd like to get some bales of hay and some other decorations to put out with it, but for now this is what I have with my jack-o'-lanterns from Home Depot and thrifted places. And at nighttime, this looks totally different because I have some spotlights that I picked up at the Dollar General store for $7. Not the best quality, but for $7, you know, it'll do. And I got 2 of them pointed at it at night. So there you go, $25 headboard turned into cool looking Halloween decor. So if you liked this video, click this next video. You're gonna like it too. And I will see you next time. Bye.